Hey guys, tonight we stand in the half-light just before dawn, when the village is still asleep and the air feels damp enough to taste. You're already awake, eyes gritty, listening to a rooster that sounds far too confident about the coming day. The forge waits for you like an impatient animal, dark and cold for now, but you know it won't stay that way for long. Somewhere nearby, a church bell will soon start its slow counting of hours, but you've been awake well before it, because iron doesn't care about your sleep schedule. You probably won't survive this lifestyle in any comfortable, modern sense of the word. And that's not drama. That's just medieval time management.
So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere in the world right now, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where these quiet nights connect us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.
You rise because you have to. The workday of a medieval blacksmith starts before the sun climbs over the thatched roofs because daylight is the most reliable resource you have. There's no switch to flip, no bulb to flicker on. Candlelight is expensive, smoky, and frankly useless when you're trying to judge the color of heated iron. So you chase the sun the way sailors chase the wind. When it's up, you work. When it's gone, you stumble home.
Historians agree that most medieval craftsmen structured their days around natural light, especially trades like blacksmithing that demanded precision and heat control. You can't see metal properly in the dark, and guessing wrong can ruin hours of labor. This means your mornings start painfully early, particularly in summer, when sunrise creeps in long before your body feels ready. In winter, the opposite happens. You work shorter days, but they feel heavier, colder, and slower, like the sun itself is reluctant to help you. You step outside, breath puffing into the chill, and the village feels suspended in time. No carts yet, no shouting merchants. Just the soft crunch of dirt under your boots, and the distant sound of someone coughing behind a shuttered window. You smell damp earth, wood smoke from last night's fires, and the faint, ever-present tang of iron that never quite leaves your hands. It's already in your clothes, your beard, your pores. If medieval deodorant were a thing, it would just smell like resignation.
By the time most people wake, you've already been working for hours. That's the first quiet injustice of the job. Farmers rise early too, sure, but at least they get to see the sky while they work. You're about to spend the day hunched over fire, eyes squinting, face glowing red from reflected heat. Sunlight becomes something you notice only when it slants through the workshop door at just the right angle. There's a mainstream historical fact that helps explain this brutal schedule. Medieval blacksmiths were essential infrastructure. Everything from plowshares to horseshoes to nails depended on you. Villages often had only one smith, sometimes shared between multiple settlements. If you didn't work, things quietly stopped functioning. Doors didn't get hinges, wagons didn't get repaired, horses went lame. So your day stretches long, not because you love the forge, but because everyone else needs it. And they need it early. A farmer might show up before breakfast with a cracked plow blade, eyes anxious, harvest looming. A messenger might arrive with a bent stirrup, horse stamping impatiently. Even the local Lord Steward might appear, reminding you, politely but firmly, that certain tasks come with expectations. The sun isn't even fully up yet, and already your time isn't yours. There's a quirky little detail tucked into some medieval records. Blacksmiths were sometimes exempt from certain communal duties, like night watch rotations, because their days were so long and physically demanding. Of course, this exemption didn't mean you got more rest. It just meant you were expected to be exhausted in a slightly more specialized way. Congratulations, you're tired professionally. As the day unfolds, you work in a rhythm dictated by light. Heat iron, hammer, reheat, hammer again. Each cycle takes time, and each mistake costs daylight. You feel the sun move without ever seeing it,
marked only by changes in brightness at the door. Morning light is cool and slanted. Midday turns harsh and flat. Late afternoon stretches shadows across the floor like long fingers. Historians still argue whether medieval craftsmen experienced something like seasonal burnout, working themselves hardest in summer when daylight was abundant, then collapsing into slower, strained routines during winter. What isn't debated is that your body never quite recovers. You go to bed sore, wake up sore, and repeat. Medieval self-care mostly involves not dying. There's a strange irony here. You work with fire all day, yet mornings are cold. Your fingers ache as you light the forge, coaxing flame from embers like you're negotiating with a stubborn spirit. Once it's going, though, the heat becomes relentless. Sweat forms even in winter, freezing later when you step outside. Medieval temperature control is basically just suffering at both extremes.
And yes, this is where one of your daily jokes happens, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. You tell yourself that at least you don't need a gym membership. Swinging a hammer 8 hours a day really keeps you in shape, assuming in shape means permanently sore and vaguely hunched. That's joke 1. Joke 2 comes when you realize your bedtime is dictated by exhaustion, not choice. You don't go to sleep, you collapse. Joke 3 is quieter. You imagine future people voluntarily lifting heavy metal for fun and calling it fitness. As dusk creeps in, you push to finish just one more piece. There's always one more. One more nail batch, one more shoe, one more repair that won't take long. The light fades, colors flatten, and the iron becomes harder to read. Eventually, you have to stop, not because you're done, but because you can't see. That's the unyielding end of the medieval workday. You step outside again, body humming with fatigue, ears ringing softly from hours of hammering. The village stirs now in a different way. Lamps flicker, voices rise, smells of cooking drift through the air. Other people are settling in. You're winding down, but tomorrow is already waiting, lurking just beyond the dark. And as you head home, you realize this is only the beginning. The long days, the early mornings, the way time itself seems forged around your labor. It's all part of what makes being a medieval blacksmith quietly, relentlessly exhausting. The forge never truly sleeps. Even when the fire is out, it lingers in the walls, in the blackened stones, in the way the air smells faintly warm and metallic, no matter how long the door has been open. You step back inside after that brief moment of dusk, and it feels like entering the belly of something that remembers you. This is where you spend most of your waking life, and it doesn't care whether you're tired or not. You close the door behind you to keep the draft from misbehaving, and the world immediately shrinks. The workshop is small. Most medieval forges were little more than a single room attached to a house or built as a squat stone hut near the center of the village. Historians generally agree that space was a luxury few blacksmiths had. The forge, anvil, bellows, and tool racks filled nearly every usable inch. If you wanted room to stretch, you went outside. If it was raining, you just didn't stretch. The first thing you notice is the heat, even before the fire is fully alive. Once you coax the coals into a proper glow, the temperature climbs fast. Charcoal burns hot and clean compared to raw wood, which is why it became the fuel of choice for many medieval smiths. That's a solid, mainstream historical fact. Charcoal could reach the temperatures needed to soften iron, and entire forests quietly disappeared to keep forges like yours running. You're not just working metal, you're slowly converting trees into horseshoes. You pump the bellows with a steady rhythm, arms already aching, and sparks leap upward like impatient insects. The sound is constant, the soft roar of the fire, the wheeze of leather bellows, the dull clink of tools shifting as you move. Over time, this noise becomes your version of silence. When it stops, it feels wrong, like your ears are suddenly empty. There's a quirky detail historians love to mention. Some medieval blacksmiths slept in rooms directly above or beside their forges.
The warmth was useful in winter, and keeping an eye on tools mattered. Of course, this also meant you went to sleep smelling like smoke and woke up smelling like smoke, and occasionally dreamed about bellows chasing you down the street. Cozy, but in a deeply alarming way. Smoke is everywhere. Even with a chimney or vent hole, it curls and clings, staining the ceiling black and settling into your lungs. You blink more than you'd like, eyes stinging, vision wavering as heat distorts the air. Long-term exposure to smoke was unavoidable, and while medieval people didn't have words for respiratory illness the way we do, they definitely noticed when smiths developed persistent coughs. You clear your throat and tell yourself it's nothing. It's always nothing, until it isn't. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths suffered higher rates of chronic lung problems than other craftsmen, or whether everyone in a medieval town just breathed terrible air all the time. Either way, your forge isn't helping. It's like voluntarily spending your life inside a very aggressive campfire.
As the day wears on, sweat becomes a second skin. It drips from your brow, sizzles when it hits hot metal, and leaves pale salt lines on your clothes. You wipe your face with a sleeve, already stiff with soot. This is not a breathable, moisture-wicking environment. Medieval workwear is mostly wool and linen. Durable, yes, but not designed for standing next to a small sun all day. If you ever wondered why medieval people looked grumpy in illustrations, try this outfit near a forge. The forge also never lets you forget where you are. The floor is gritty with charcoal dust and metal flakes. Your boots grind softly with every step. Tools hang from pegs or lie stacked in careful disorder. Tongs of different shapes, hammers with worn handles, chisels you sharpen obsessively because a dull edge means more work. Each tool has its place because knocking something over could mean burned feet or ruined work. You learn to move carefully in a space that actively wants to hurt you. There's a strange intimacy to it. You know every crack in the stone, every loose peg, every spot where the floor dips just enough to catch your toe if you're not paying attention. The forge becomes an extension of your body, and that's not a metaphor, it's survival. You reach for tools without looking, hands moving on muscle memory alone. When visitors step inside, they fumble and hesitate. You don't. This is your territory, and it demands respect. Here's one of those light jokes to keep us awake. You realize your workshop is essentially an early version of a sauna, except instead of relaxation and eucalyptus, it offers minor injuries and existential fatigue. Joke 2 follows quickly. You think about how modern people pay money to experience authentic blacksmithing workshops for an afternoon, and you wonder if they know they're role-playing your entire life. Joke 3 arrives quietly, as you notice you haven't sat down in hours and can't remember the last time you did. The heat isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Too hot and the iron burns, becoming brittle and useless. Too cool and it resists every blow, mocking you with its stubbornness. Reading the color of the metal is everything, and that's harder when your eyes are tired and the air shimmers. Bright yellow means one thing, dull red means another. Get it wrong, and the forge punishes you with wasted effort. You adjust the bellows again, sweat dripping, back aching, and feel the day stretch on. Outside, life continues. Inside, time melts into a single, continuous task. Meals are eaten quickly, standing up, between heats. Water is precious, and you drink sparingly, knowing every trip outside costs momentum. The forge demands focus, and it rewards distraction with burns. There's a fringe detail that pops up in some accounts. Blacksmiths were thought to possess a kind of secret knowledge because of their control over fire. People noticed how you could turn dull rock into useful shapes, and they didn't always understand the process. This fed into later superstitions, where smiths were seen as liminal figures, half craftsman, half magician. Standing here, face glowing red in the firelight, you can almost see why. By the time night truly settles in, the forge is still warm, still breathing softly. You finally let the fire die down, embers glowing like tired eyes. Your body hums with heat, even as the air cools. The silence feels heavy, almost loud after it.
Your hands hurt before the day truly begins, which feels unfair, but also deeply on brand for your life choices. As soon as you wrap your fingers around a hammer, you're reminded that every tool in this workshop has the potential to hurt you, even the ones you know best, especially the ones you know best. Familiarity breeds confidence, and confidence breeds the kind of tiny mistakes that add up over years. The hammer feels solid, reassuring, like an old friend who occasionally hits you. Its wooden handle is smooth from use, worn to the shape of your grip. Medieval hammers weren't standardized the way modern ones are. Many were custom-made, sometimes even by the smith who used them. That's a mainstream historical fact. Blacksmiths often crafted or modified their own tools, tailoring weight and balance to personal preference. You swing what feels right to you, not what some catalog says is ideal.
And yet, no matter how perfectly balanced, the hammer still sends shock up your arm with every strike. The anvil answers back, ringing softly, a sound that sinks into your bones. Over time, that vibration settles into your wrists, elbows, shoulders. You don't have words like repetitive strain injury, but you definitely feel something is wearing down. You shake out your hands, flex your fingers, and get back to it. There's always more iron waiting.
Tongs bite next. You clamp them around a glowing bar, and if your grip is off by even a little, the metal twists or slips. Best case, it clatters harmlessly to the floor, showering sparks. Worst case, it brushes your leg or foot, and you learn a new level of regret. There's a reason blacksmiths wear thick leather aprons. It's not for fashion, unless burn-resistant chic is trending in your village.
Here's a quirky tidbit. Archaeological finds suggest that some medieval smiths wrapped cloth or leather around tool handles to reduce vibration and improve grip. It's an early form of ergonomic design, born not from comfort, but from survival. You don't call it ergonomics, you call it making the pain slightly less terrible.
The anvil itself is the most dangerous friend of all. Solid, immovable, and utterly indifferent to your knuckles. You've clipped your hand more times than you can count, skin splitting, nails bruising. It's rarely a dramatic injury, just enough to sting, bleed, and remind you to be more careful next time. Except next time comes quickly, and fatigue dulls your reflexes. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths developed a higher tolerance for pain, or whether they simply normalized it to the point of invisibility. From your perspective, pain is just part of the background noise, like smoke, like heat, like the ringing in your ears that never fully goes away.
Speaking of ears, the sound inside the forge is relentless. Hammer on anvil again and again, echoing off stone walls. You don't have ear protection. No one does. Over years, the world grows a little quieter at the edges. You don't notice right away. You just start asking people to repeat themselves, or you nod along and hope you heard correctly. It's fine. Everything's fine. This is joke 1. Your hearing slowly leaving without even saying goodbye. Your tools also demand maintenance. A chipped hammer face can scar metal. A loose handle can turn a controlled swing into chaos. You spend precious time sharpening, tightening, adjusting. It feels ironic to work so hard just to keep working hard. Joke 2 creeps in here. You realize half your job is maintaining the things that help you do your job, which is very meta and not at all restful. Then there are the accidents that happen when you're tired. A missed strike, a slipped grip, a moment of distraction when someone speaks at the wrong time. Burns bloom on your skin, small and frequent, like constellations mapping your career. You hiss, shake your hand, maybe dunk it in water if it's nearby. There's no dramatic pause. The iron is still hot. The work continues. There's a fringe belief that circulated in some regions. Blacksmiths were thought to be resistant to fire, or at least less harmed by it because of their constant exposure. Obviously, you're not immune, but after years of this, your hands are thick-skinned, scarred, less sensitive. Whether that's biology or just resignation is up for debate. Either way, you handle heat in a way that makes other people step back nervously. Your feet take their share too. Dropped tools, falling slag, the occasional hot fragment that sneaks past your boots. Medieval footwear isn't exactly steel-toed. You hop, curse softly, then laugh at yourself, because what else are you going to do? Joke 3 arrives here. You imagine inventing something like protective footwear and realize it will take several more centuries for that thought to go anywhere.
Despite all this, there's a rhythm to the work that almost soothes you. Swing, turn, swing, turn. The repetition lulls your mind even as your body complains. It's meditative in a brutal way. You focus on the task, and for a while, everything else fades. Worries about payment, about tomorrow, about your aching back, they all blur into the steady beat of hammer on iron. The tools may bite back, but they also obey. When everything goes right, when the metal moves exactly as you want it to, there's a quiet satisfaction. You made this happen with your hands, your tools, your patience. That feeling keeps you coming back, even when your knuckles are split and your wrists throb. By the end of the day, your hands are swollen, fingers stiff, palms rough. You flex them slowly, feeling the resistance. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. Same tools, same risks, same small victories. And as you set the hammer down, you understand something deeply. The forge doesn't just shape iron, it shapes you, one bruise at a time. The iron does not care about your plans. You can arrive at the forge with a clear idea of what you want to make, how long it should take, and when you might finally rest, and the metal will still resist you at every step. This is the quiet truth you learn early on. Iron is stubborn, and it makes sure you earn every shape you force out of it. You lift a bar from the coals, its surface glowing a dull red, and for a brief moment it almost looks cooperative. That illusion lasts exactly one strike. The hammer falls, the anvil rings, and the metal barely moves, as if pretending it didn't feel a thing. You sigh, adjust your grip, and hit it again. This is not a negotiation. It's a long, sweaty argument. Mainstream history tells us that medieval blacksmiths worked primarily with wrought iron, a material full of impurities and slag that made it tougher and more fibrous than modern steel. That fibrous quality gave it strength, but it also made it unpredictable. Some pieces bent willingly, others fought you like they had a personal grudge. You never quite knew what you'd get until you started working it, which added an extra layer of tension to every job. You reheat the bar, because iron cools faster than your patience. Back into the fire it goes, bellows pumping, sparks flying. Each trip between anvil and forge feels longer than the last. The heat is relentless. Your arms are already tired, and you've barely begun. This is where time stretches. Not dramatically, not excitingly, just slowly, stubbornly, like the metal itself. There's a quirky detail hidden in the process. Blacksmiths judge temperature by color alone. No gauges, no thermometers, just shades of red, orange, and yellow. Cherry red, blood red, bright yellow. Each color meant something different, and misreading it meant wasted effort or ruined work. After years at the forge, you see these colors in your sleep. It's like your brain has added a new sense, one dedicated entirely to glowing metal. Historians still argue whether this reliance on visual cues limited medieval metallurgy or sharpened it into an art form. From where you're standing, sweat dripping into your eyes, it feels like both. You are an artist, yes, but one who works with fire and exhaustion as constant collaborators. The iron also demands patience. If you rush, it cracks or warps. If you linger too long, it cools and stiffens. You learn to move at its pace, not yours. This is deeply annoying, because your pace would be finish quickly and sit down, and iron has never respected that goal. Your arms burn as you strike again and again, muscles protesting. The sound fills the workshop, rhythmic and dull. Swing, turn, strike. Swing, turn, strike. The repetition becomes hypnotic. Your thoughts slow, narrowing to the next blow. This is not a peaceful meditation. It's more like your brain temporarily giving up and letting muscle memory take over. Here comes joke one, soft and sleepy. You realize iron is like a medieval customer who keeps changing their mind. You bend it one way, it resists. You try another, it sulks. Joke 2 arrives as you consider how people think of blacksmithing as heroic and strong, when so much of it is just the same piece over and over because it cooled while you blinked. Joke 3 sneaks in when you catch yourself talking to the metal under your breath, as if encouragement might help. It doesn't. But you keep doing it.
The impurities in wrought iron mean you have to work it carefully, folding and hammering to distribute slag and improve strength. This process takes time and energy, and every fold is another chance for something to go wrong. If you're unlucky, a flaw reveals itself late, undoing hours of work. You stare at the piece, jaw tight, and decide whether to start over or try to salvage it. Starting over is exhausting. Salvaging it might fail anyway. You choose, because you have to.
There's a fringe story that floats around some medieval communities. Certain smiths were believed to have a good hand with iron, able to coax better results from poor quality metal. Whether that was skill, reputation, or pure luck is up for debate. You suspect it's mostly experience and stubbornness, a willingness to keep hitting something until it behaves. As the day wears on, your strength fades slightly, just enough to matter. The iron doesn't get lighter. Your blows lose a bit of their edge. You compensate by working longer, reheating more often. This is how hours slip away, not in big moments, but in tiny extensions of effort that add up until dusk is suddenly pressing at the door.
Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths paced themselves deliberately or simply worked until exhaustion forced them to stop. You'd like to believe you're pacing yourself, but some days it feels like the iron decides when you're done. When your arms tremble and your strikes go wild, that's the metal telling you it's had enough of you. Finally, the shape starts to emerge, a curve where there wasn't one before, a flattened edge. Progress, slow and hard won. You feel a flicker of satisfaction, quickly smothered by the knowledge that you're only halfway done. Shaping is just the beginning. There's still refining, fitting, cooling. You set the piece aside to cool, watching the glow fade to black. The iron looks inert now, harmless. You know better. It's still hot enough to burn, still heavy enough to hurt. Like everything else in your life, it demands respect, even when it seems calm. As you wipe your brow and reach for the next bar, you understand the truth that underpins your trade. Iron will never make things easy for you. It will only ever meet you halfway, and only after you've paid for the privilege in sweat and time. By now, pain has become so familiar that it barely registers as a warning. It's just there, woven into the background of your day, like the ringing in your ears or the smell of smoke in your clothes. Burns, blisters, and scars accumulate quietly, one small mistake at a time, until your skin tells the story of your work even when you don't. You glance down at your hands, thickened and rough, crisscrossed with old marks. Some are pale and shiny, others darker, newer, still tender if pressed just right. These aren't heroic scars from epic moments. They come from brushing hot iron for half a second too long, from sparks landing where you didn't expect, from grabbing something you thought had cooled. Thought is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Mainstream historical accounts agree on this much. Medieval blacksmiths were constantly injured, though rarely in ways that made chronicles or songs. Small burns and cuts were part of daily life. There was no such thing as a minor injury when you had no antiseptic, no painkillers beyond alcohol, and no option to take time off. You learned quickly which wounds could be ignored and which ones might quietly end your ability to work. You blister easily at first. New skin, unprepared, bubbles and peels.
Over time, calluses form, thick and stubborn, dulling sensation. It's not immunity, it's adaptation. Your hands become tools themselves, less sensitive, more durable. Historians still argue whether this loss of sensitivity improved precision or reduced it. From your perspective, it mostly just means you notice injuries later, when they're already inconvenient. There's a strange rhythm to getting burned. It happens fast. A sharp sting, a hiss, maybe a muttered curse. Then you're back to work, because stopping means losing heat, losing time, losing momentum. You might dunk your hand in water if the pain is bad enough, but even that's a gamble. Too much cold, and the skin cracks later. You balance discomfort the way you balance everything else.
Here's a quirky tidbit that floats through some historical anecdotes. Animal fat, butter, or oil was sometimes rubbed on burns or cracked skin. Whether it helped or just made everything smell worse is up for debate. You try it anyway, because when your options are limited, you take what you can get. Your hands end up slick, greasy, and still sore. At least dinner is close by.
The scars don't stay on your hands alone. Forearms catch sparks. Ankles feel the kiss of hot slag. Occasionally, something lands on your shoulder or neck, and you jerk away, heart racing. These moments wake you up faster than any rooster ever could. You laugh it off later, because if you don't, the fear might linger, and fear has no place next to an anvil. Historians still argue whether medieval workers perceived pain differently, culturally speaking, or whether they simply had fewer ways to express or alleviate it. You don't have time to ponder that deeply. Pain is a signal you acknowledge, then file away. There's iron waiting. This is where joke 1 slides in softly. You realize your body is essentially turning into a medieval warning label. Caution, hot, sharp, and prone to injury. Joke 2 follows when you consider that if you ever stopped working, your scars would probably heal, and that thought feels almost unsettling. Joke 3 arrives quietly as you notice you no longer flinch at small burns, and you're not sure when that changed. Infections are the real worry. A cut that seems harmless can swell, redden, throb. You keep an eye on it, flexing your fingers, testing movement. If it gets worse, you might apply herbs, poultices, or prayers, depending on what's available and who you trust. Medical knowledge exists, but it's uneven, inconsistent, and often expensive. Most of the time, you rely on luck and your own stubborn resilience. There's a fringe belief in some regions that blacksmiths were protected by their closeness to fire, that burns and injuries were less likely to fester because heat purified the body. This is comforting, and probably not true, but comfort counts for something. You take what reassurance you can get, even if it's wrapped in superstition. Your scars also change how people see you. When villagers come to the forge, they notice your hands first. The marks lend you a certain authority. You look like someone who knows what they're doing, someone who has paid the price of experience. It's a strange kind of credibility, earned through pain rather than words.
As the years pass, your tolerance grows, but so does the cumulative damage. Joints stiffen. Old injuries ache in the cold. Burns that healed poorly tighten the skin, limiting movement just enough to be annoying. You adapt, adjusting your grip, your stance, your rhythm. The forge teaches flexibility, not just in metal, but in flesh. At the end of the day, when you finally sit, really sit, you feel everything at once. The warmth fades and aches bloom. You inspect your hands by firelight, turning them slowly, cataloging new marks. Nothing too bad today, you think. That's a victory.
You wrap your hands in cloth, or simply tuck them into your sleeves, breathing out slowly. Tomorrow will add more scars. That's inevitable. But tonight, you rest. Body heavy, mind quiet, knowing that pain has become just another part of the craft.
The smoke follows you everywhere, even when you step outside. It clings to your hair, your clothes, your skin, settling so deeply that you stop noticing it until someone else wrinkles their nose. Inside the forge, it hangs in lazy layers, thick enough to taste. You breathe it in without thinking,
because thinking about it would slow you down, and slowing down is rarely an option. You stoke the fire again, and the charcoal responds with a low roar. Medieval blacksmiths relied heavily on charcoal rather than coal for much of the Middle Ages, especially in Europe, because it burned hotter and cleaner than raw wood. That's the mainstream historical fact. Cleaner, of course, is relative. The smoke still billows, still curls into your lungs, still leaves your throat dry and scratchy by midday.
Ventilation exists, but it's basic. A hole in the roof, a chimney that sometimes works, depending on the wind, open doors when the weather allows. On bad days, the smoke just refuses to leave. It drifts back down, stinging your eyes, blurring your vision until the world looks permanently watery. You blink hard, squinting at glowing iron through a haze that never quite clears.
Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths understood the long-term dangers of smoke inhalation. You suspect they understood it the way people understand rain. You don't analyze it, you just accept that it's part of the environment. Coughing becomes normal. A rough voice becomes expected. If your chest tightens sometimes, you chalk it up to a cold or bad air and keep going.
There's a quirky little detail from some medieval texts. Smiths were advised to take breaks outdoors when possible, not for rest, but to clear the head. Whether this was early occupational health advice or just common sense is unclear. You step outside when you can, leaning against the door frame, gulping cool air like it's a luxury item. Even then, the smoke comes with you, exhaled back into the world.
Your lungs work harder than you realize. Each breath pulls in heat and particles, tiny bits of charcoal and ash. You cough into your sleeve, a dry, rattling sound that startles a passing villager. They ask if you're all right. You nod, because explaining would take energy you don't have. Besides, what's the alternative? Not breathing?
Here's joke 1, drifting in softly. You realize you've essentially chosen a career inside a poorly ventilated barbecue pit. Joke 2 follows when you consider how people romanticize the smell of a forge as if it's a candle scent and not a persistent respiratory challenge. Joke 3 arrives as you notice you can identify types of smoke by smell alone, which feels like a skill no one asked for.
Over time, the smoke leaves its mark. Your teeth stain. Your beard smells perpetually burnt. Your chest feels heavy at night, especially when you lie down and the world goes quiet. Sleep comes with shallow breaths and the occasional wheeze. You adjust your position, propping yourself slightly, finding ways to be comfortable without knowing why comfort suddenly matters more.
There's a fringe theory some scholars mention. Blacksmiths may have had shorter life expectancies than other craftsmen, partly due to respiratory issues. The evidence is patchy, records incomplete. Historians still argue whether the forge shortened lives or whether harsh medieval conditions did that across the board. From where you're standing, coughing into the smoky dark, the distinction feels academic. The smoke also affects your work. It dulls your senses, makes it harder to read metal color accurately. Your eyes sting, tear up, and suddenly that glowing bar looks brighter or dimmer than it really is. You adjust, second guess, reheat more often than necessary. The iron doesn't mind, your arms do. Visitors don't stay long. They step inside, squint, cough once or twice, then retreat to the doorway to shout their requests. You don't blame them. The forge is an acquired atmosphere. You've acquired it slowly, like a habit, like a tolerance you never meant to build.
Even meals are affected. Food tastes faintly smoky, no matter where you eat. Bread carries a hint of ash. Stew smells like it's been cooked twice. You stop noticing until you visit someone else's home and realize their air feels lighter, cleaner. You breathe deeper there, and it feels almost suspicious. The smoke seeps into everything you own. Clothes, bedding, tools. Washing helps, but only briefly. Soon enough, the scent returns, a quiet reminder of where you spend your days. It becomes part of your identity. People know a blacksmith is nearby before they see you.
You announce yourself without meaning to.
As evening settles, you let the fire die down, watching the last tendrils of smoke twist upward. The air clears slowly, reluctantly. You open the door wide, letting night air flood in, cool and sharp. You stand there for a moment, breathing deeply, chest rising and falling, savoring the relief. Tomorrow, the smoke will be back. It always is. For now, you step outside, lungs aching slightly, body tired, and remind yourself that this is just another cost of the craft, one you pay quietly, breath by breath.
You are never truly working for yourself. Even when the forge door is closed and the fire is yours alone, the village is waiting just outside, leaning on your anvil with invisible elbows. Every clang of metal carries an unspoken reminder. People depend on you, and dependency has a way of turning into pressure. By mid-morning, they start arriving. Farmers first, usually. Mud still on their boots, worry etched into their faces. A plowshare cracked at the worst possible moment. A hoe bent beyond polite usefulness. They needed fixed now, because fields don't pause for repairs. You nod, because nodding is faster than explaining that you already have a queue forming in your head. This is a mainstream historical reality. Medieval villages relied heavily on local blacksmiths for agricultural survival. Tools broke often, and replacements weren't mass-produced. If you didn't fix it, it didn't get fixed. Food production slowed. Everyone felt it. That knowledge sits heavy on your shoulders as you take the damaged tool, weighing not just the iron, but the urgency attached to it.
Then come the horse owners. Horseshoes loosen, wear thin, crack. A lame horse is a problem that travels fast and complains loudly. You crouch, lift a hoof, work carefully around a living, shifting animal that does not care about your fingers. The smell changes here. Hot iron mixed with hay, sweat, and animal breath. It's a different kind of concentration, one mistake away from a kick that could end your career.
By midday, the less urgent requests appear. Hinges for a door, nails for a chest, a latch that sticks. These people wait longer, hovering at the edge of the forge, watching you work, commenting helpfully. You smile thinly and keep hammering. Medieval customer service is mostly endurance. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths held elevated social status in villages or were simply tolerated out of necessity. You feel both admired and taken for granted in equal measure. People praise your skill, then flinch at your prices. They thank you profusely, then forget to pay on time. Dependency breeds familiarity, and familiarity has a way of eroding courtesy.
Here's a quirky tidbit. In some regions, blacksmiths were expected to prioritize certain jobs automatically. Plow tools during planting season, horseshoes during travel months, weapons during conflict. These expectations weren't always written down, but everyone knew them. You feel them keenly when someone asks for a decorative piece while a farmer waits, tapping his foot, food security on the line.
Joke 1 drifts in gently. You realize you're essentially running medieval tech support. Everyone only shows up when something is broken and urgently wants it fixed yesterday. Joke 2 follows when you consider that no one ever brings you something that works perfectly and says, "Just thought you'd like to admire this." Joke 3 arrives quietly as you notice you haven't eaten yet, but you've solved 6 other people's problems already.
The pressure isn't always polite. Occasionally, a local official or a minor noble's representative appears, voice smooth, expectation sharp. Their requests come with an implied hierarchy. You're paid, eventually, but refusal isn't really an option. You weigh your words carefully, because while you're indispensable, you're not untouchable. There's also the constant mental juggling. Every piece you accept commits future hours of labor. Say yes too freely, and you work late into the night. Say no too often, and reputations shift. People talk. Villages are small. You choose your balance carefully, even when your arms are tired and your head aches.
Your forge becomes a crossroads of village life. Gossip drifts in with customers, news from neighboring towns, rumors of bad harvests, better prices elsewhere, possible trouble on the roads. You listen while you work, half present, absorbing information without seeking it. In a world without newspapers, the forge is a loud, smoky bulletin board. The dependency cuts both ways. When you're sick, truly sick, the village feels it. Tools pile up unfixed, horses wait, people grumble. Some offer help, others just wait impatiently. Historians still argue how often blacksmiths could afford to rest or recover from illness. You suspect the answer is rarely enough.
As afternoon stretches on, fatigue creeps in, but the requests don't stop. Someone always needs something. The forge fire stays lit longer than planned. Your shoulders sag slightly, posture slipping. You correct it out of habit. Pain waits politely until evening. There's a subtle loneliness here, too. You interact with everyone, yet you're separate. Work keeps you apart from communal rhythms. Shared meals, idle conversation, long rests. You're present but busy, needed but not free. The village depends on you, but it doesn't carry your exhaustion for you.
As dusk approaches, the flow finally slows. People drift away, satisfied, or at least resigned. You look at what remains on your bench, mentally sorting tomorrow's priorities. The fire crackles softly, as if amused by your planning. You step outside briefly, stretching your back, watching villagers settle into evening routines. You feel the weight of their reliance settle with the dark. Tomorrow they'll return. They always do. And you'll be here, because if you're not, the village stutters. You take a deep breath, smoky and tired, and turn back toward the forge. Dependency isn't dramatic. It's steady, persistent, and impossible to set down.
When the work is finally done for the day, when the iron is cooled and the fire has been coaxed into embers, you turn your thoughts to payment. Not because it's exciting, but because it's necessary. Unfortunately, necessity does not guarantee simplicity. Money, in your world, has a habit of arriving late, partially, or in forms that definitely were not what you had in mind. Coins exist, of course. Silver pennies, occasionally something larger if you're very lucky. But actual currency is scarce, and it moves slowly through a medieval village. Most people don't carry much of it, especially farmers whose wealth is tied up in land, tools, and the hope that next season won't be terrible. So when they come to you, pockets light, they offer alternatives. This is a mainstream historical reality. Barter was common, especially for skilled trades. You're paid in grain, eggs, cheese, wool, or future promises. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes you end up with more turnips than you can reasonably consume. You nod, smile, and accept, because refusing means not getting paid at all. You store what you can. Grain goes in sacks. Meat gets salted or smoked. Other goods get traded onward, a slow secondary barter that turns your workshop into a strange economic hub. You spend time figuring out how many horseshoes equal a sack of barley, how many nails equal a chicken. Medieval accounting is flexible, creative, and deeply annoying.
Historians still argue how profitable blacksmithing really was on average. Some records show smiths doing well, even accumulating modest wealth. Others suggest a hand-to-mouth existence, constantly balancing labor against survival. Your experience feels like a careful walk on uneven ground. One good season can be undone by one bad one. There's a quirky tidbit tucked into some town records. Blacksmiths were sometimes paid in the right to use communal land or resources, like grazing rights or access to wood. This sounds generous until you remember that accessing those resources still takes time and labor. You trade one kind of work for another and call it fair. Here's joke one, drifting in with a sigh. You realize you've become very good at pretending to be excited about potatoes. Joke 2 follows when you mentally calculate how many loaves of bread your latest sword repair is worth and wonder if swords are secretly terrible investments. Joke 3 arrives quietly as you accept yet another "I'll pay you after harvest," knowing full well that harvest is both a season and a moving target.
The worst part isn't barter, it's delay. People mean well, mostly.
They just don't have what you need when you need it. Your own expenses don't wait. Charcoal has to be bought or made. Tools wear out. Repairs on the forge itself can't be paid with gratitude. You extend credit because refusing feels cruel and impractical, but credit is a fragile thing. Occasionally, someone simply doesn't pay. They avoid you, take longer routes through the village, suddenly remember urgent errands when they see smoke rising from your forge. You notice, you remember. But confronting them risks conflict, and conflict with neighbors rarely ends well. You file the debt away in your mind, a small weight that never quite disappears. Historians still argue whether guild systems, where present, helped stabilize income or simply added another layer of obligation. In places without strong guilds, like many rural areas, smiths were especially vulnerable to economic swings. You feel that vulnerability when winter approaches and food stores look thin. Payment in goods also blurs the line between work and life. Your dinner might be something you earned by hammering all afternoon. There's satisfaction in that, yes, but also a constant reminder that if you can't work, you don't eat. No work means no goods, no barter, no safety net. Occasionally, a traveler or merchant appears with actual coin. These moments feel almost luxurious. You weigh the silver in your hand, feeling its promise. Coin can be saved, hidden, used later without spoiling or sprouting. You tuck it away carefully, aware that it represents time you might buy later if things go well. There's also the subtle social negotiation. Charging too much risks resentment. Charging too little devalues your skill. You adjust prices based on relationship, urgency, season. This flexibility keeps the peace, but erodes consistency. You are constantly calibrating your worth, one transaction at a time. As evening settles, you inventory not just your tools, but your earnings. A sack of grain, a small wedge of cheese, 2 promised payments, 1 coin. You sigh, already planning how to stretch it. The fire glows softly, indifferent to economics. You remind yourself that tomorrow will bring more work, more barter, more negotiation. This is the quiet grind behind the grind. The iron is hard, but the math might be harder. You close the forge, step into the night, and carry your payment home. Not jingling, but heavy in other ways. The guild watches you, even when it feels like it isn't there at all. Its presence is subtle, woven into expectations, rules, and the quiet understanding of how things are supposed to be done. Depending on where you live, the guild might be powerful, ceremonial, or little more than a name, but its influence shapes your working life in ways that are hard to escape. In towns large enough to support one, blacksmiths often belonged to a guild that regulated training, tools, pricing, and quality. That's a mainstream historical fact. Guilds were meant to protect both craftsmen and customers, ensuring standards and preventing undercutting. On paper, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it feels like someone peering over your shoulder while you work. You remember your apprenticeship clearly. Years spent sweeping floors, pumping bellows, watching closely. You weren't allowed to touch real work at first, then small tasks, then, slowly, responsibility. The guild decided when you were ready, not you. That structure kept unskilled labor from flooding the market, but it also meant your progress depended on approval as much as ability. Historians still argue whether guilds primarily empowered craftsmen or constrained innovation. From your perspective, they do both. They offer protection from unfair competition, yes, but they also lock you into tradition. Try something new and eyebrows rise. Deviate too far, and someone might complain. Guild rules dictate what you can sell, how much you can charge, and sometimes even when you can work. Night work might be restricted to prevent fire hazards. Certain jobs might be reserved for masters only. You follow these rules not because you love them, but because breaking them carries consequences. Fines, loss of standing, or worse, being shut out entirely. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some guilds required members to stamp or mark their work with a personal symbol. It was an early form of branding and quality control. You take pride in your mark, even as it ties you to every mistake. A poorly made hinge isn't just bad, it's publicly yours.
Joke 1 slides in here gently. You realize the guild is like a medieval comment section, full of opinions, rarely quiet, and convinced it knows best. Joke 2 follows when you think about how many meetings you've endured that could have been avoided if everyone just trusted you to do your job. Joke 3 arrives as you imagine explaining these rules to a future world obsessed with freelancing.
The guild also shapes your social world. Fellow smiths are colleagues, competitors, and occasional rivals. You exchange techniques cautiously. Knowledge is currency, and giving too much away can hurt you later. At the same time, you rely on these same people for support, tools, and sometimes shared work. It's a delicate balance. In smaller villages without formal guilds, the rules are looser but no less real. Tradition fills the gaps. This is how it's always been done, carries as much weight as any written law. You follow customs passed down by your master, who followed his master, stretching back farther than anyone remembers. Guilds can also limit your mobility. Moving to another town often requires approval, fees, or proof of mastery. You can't simply pack up and start fresh elsewhere. Your skills are portable, but your permission isn't. This keeps communities stable, but it also keeps you in place, even when better opportunities might exist beyond the horizon. Historians still argue whether these restrictions protected local economies or stifled individual ambition. Standing in your forge, rules echoing in your head, it feels like both again. Stability has a cost, and you pay it in freedom.
As evening approaches, you finish a piece and inspect it carefully. Quality matters, not just to you, but to the guild, to your reputation, to your ability to keep working. You smooth an edge, adjust a curve, erase a flaw only you would notice. The standards are high, and once internalized, they never really leave. You hang your tools, sweep the floor, and think about tomorrow's tasks, already shaped by rules you didn't write. The guild fades into the background, as it always does, but it never disappears. You step outside into the cooling air, knowing that while the forge may be yours, the way you work within it belongs to something larger and less flexible than you.
Supplies are another quiet form of torture. You can have the skill, the fire, the knowledge, and the determination, but without raw materials, the forge is nothing more than a heated, smoky room. Iron bars, charcoal, coal, tongs, hammers, bellows, all must be sourced, maintained, and sometimes rationed. And medieval supply chains are not known for efficiency. You trudge to the woodpile, assessing the charcoal. Some is soft, ready to burn quickly, while other pieces are too dense, slow to catch. Charcoal isn't just fuel. It's a variable, unpredictable partner in your work. If it burns too hot, you risk ruining your iron. Too cool, and the metal won't soften. It's a lesson in patience and compromise, because you rarely get exactly what you need. Mainstream historical accounts tell us that most blacksmiths relied on local forests to create charcoal, often clearing small patches of woodland for repeated use. This is a slow, laborious process that connects your work to the surrounding environment in ways that modern craftsmen rarely consider. Each bar of iron is literally paying in trees, one spark at a time. Iron itself is another challenge. Wrought iron is tough, inconsistent, filled with slag, and yet utterly necessary. You receive your supply from a local merchant, or mine, if you're lucky. Sometimes the quality is poor, the bars warped or brittle. You curse silently and start the laborious process of straightening, reheating, hammering. The material is your collaborator, but one with a very demanding personality. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths actively selected iron from multiple sources to ensure quality, or whether they largely adapted to whatever was available. From where you're standing, you do a little of both. Adaptation is survival. Discernment is pride. The fringe details get weirder. Some blacksmiths reportedly tested iron by bending or even tasting small fragments, a curious method to judge purity, though one wonders about the wisdom of licking anything near the forge. You avoid tasting iron. You rely on sight, touch, and experience.
Still, the lore makes for entertaining stories at village gatherings, where apprentices nod solemnly while secretly thinking their master is slightly unhinged.
Supplies extend beyond raw materials. Tools must be maintained. Hammers chip, tongs loosen, chisels dull. The forge itself needs constant attention. Ashes must be removed, floors swept, bellows oiled. You spend half your life keeping the tools of labor in order. It is a recursive struggle. You maintain your tools to maintain your work. Joke 1 arrives quietly. You are, in essence, paid to polish and pump, sometimes more than to actually forge. Joke 2 slides in when you consider that your day could be summed up as keeping chaos at bay with repeated strikes. Joke 3 drifts in softly. You've become part of a machine, where the machine includes your own exhaustion.
Occasionally, a shipment of iron is delayed, or the charcoal from the forest is wet from rain, or the bellows strap snaps mid-use. Each problem demands improvisation. You patch, swap, reroute, all while keeping the fire alive and the villagers happy. You have no luxury of pause. Supplies are life, and without them, the forge dies, or at least your ability to work effectively does. Some scholars argue that supply issues dictated the pace and even the quality of medieval smithing. Without reliable materials, a blacksmith could not consistently meet standards. You know this firsthand. A warped bar today might mean a poorly fitted horseshoe tomorrow, or a delayed plow repair, or a frayed relationship with the village that depends on you. There's also a social element to sourcing materials. Neighbors and merchants can be helpful, but their motivations vary. Prices fluctuate, favors are called in. Barter might supplement scarce resources. One day you'll owe someone a favor for a sack of charcoal, and next week they'll remind you. Medieval economics is not as abstract as textbooks make it sound. It's personal, persistent, and occasionally petty. You carry iron bars from the storage area, muscles humming with strain. Each movement reminds you that labor is never just for the metal, it's for the life that surrounds it. The payment, the food, the firewood, the community. Supplies are the silent puppet strings, tugging you along whether you notice or not. By evening, everything has been checked and sorted. Charcoal piles are ready, iron stacked carefully, tools inspected and sharpened. You breathe a small sigh of relief, knowing that tomorrow, when the villagers arrive and the forge roars back to life, at least the materials won't betray you. Not today.
And yet, deep down, you know that the supply problem never truly ends. Materials are never guaranteed. Each day is a negotiation with the elements, with merchants, with scarcity itself. The forge may be yours, but the raw components are fleeting, demanding constant vigilance and energy.
Fatigue sets in, creeping along your muscles like a slow tide, and yet the work never pauses. Even as the sun climbs higher and the air grows warmer, you keep moving. You pump the bellows, lift the hammer, check the fire, and repeat. Each movement is deliberate but exhausting, a rhythm that blends strength, endurance, and resignation. The body has a memory for this kind of repetition, and yours has learned to anticipate it, painfully.
You notice your shoulders first. The muscles ache with a dull, constant throb, as if quietly reminding you that they are carrying not just iron, but the accumulated labor of weeks, months, years. Your arms, forearms especially, are stiff, cords of tension running from elbows to fingertips. By midday, the muscles are trembling ever so slightly, though you can still maintain control. This is your new normal. Mainstream historical accounts confirm it. Medieval blacksmiths routinely experienced extreme physical fatigue due to the repetitive, heavy labor of their craft. The hours were long, the work continuous, and rest was a privilege rarely granted. You are living proof of these historical patterns, muscles complaining in real time while the forge continues to roar.
Fatigue also affects your mind. Decisions that would once be automatic now require focus. The right angle of a hammer strike, the precise timing of a bellows pump, the subtle judgment of iron color.
Each becomes a little more taxing as exhaustion sets in. Even so, you continue, because the day demands it. The forge does not understand tiredness. It only responds to action.
Here's a quirky detail. Some medieval blacksmiths developed a habitual pacing of work and rest, almost ritualistic in timing, to stave off extreme exhaustion. You, of course, adapt your own rhythms. Brief pauses for breath, a sip of water, a quick shake of the arms, but they are rarely enough. You've long realized that you can't stop completely. The fire cools, the iron hardens, and a delay can undo hours of effort.
Joke 1 drifts in softly. You imagine modern office workers complaining about long hours, while you're here hammering metal under heat, smoke, and unrelenting physical strain. Joke 2 follows when you consider that your version of taking a break is stepping back to admire your own sweat stains. Joke 3 quietly emerges as you acknowledge that exhaustion has become both a companion and a curse.
Your legs are not spared. Lifting heavy bars, bending repeatedly, standing on uneven stone floors, all of it slowly degrades endurance. You adjust your stance constantly, shifting weight from one leg to the other, balancing fatigue against necessity. Your boots are sturdy, yes, but no pair can erase the toll of hours on stone and dirt. Ankles and knees remember every misstep, every slip, even the smallest uneven patch of floor.
Historians still argue whether blacksmiths were more physically resilient than other craftsmen or simply adapted over time. You suspect a combination, a natural baseline of strength honed through labor, supplemented by experience and stubborn persistence. Either way, fatigue is unavoidable. It comes for everyone eventually.
Beyond the body, there's the mental fatigue that hangs like smoke. Decisions compound. Minor errors feel heavier. Sparks seem to appear more often in inconvenient places. The same repetitive sounds, hammer striking iron, bellows wheezing, coals crackling, begin to blur together, creating a kind of hypnotic monotony. You focus fiercely, but the mind drifts now and then, only to be pulled back by the sharpness of reality. Fatigue also fosters caution. Your blows become more deliberate, your movements more measured. You instinctively calculate angles and force, compensating for the subtle tremor in your arms. It's a delicate dance. Too cautious, and the metal resists. Too forceful, and mistakes happen. Exhaustion becomes a silent partner in the forge, guiding, correcting, nagging.
Some fringe accounts suggest that blacksmiths developed small rituals or superstitions to ward off accidents when fatigued, touching a talisman, muttering a quick prayer, or tapping a hammer on the anvil before striking. Whether this actually reduced mishaps is uncertain, but you understand the psychology. Rituals focus the mind, especially when muscles falter and judgment wavers.
By late afternoon, your body hums with a persistent ache. You've learned to recognize the difference between normal fatigue and strain that threatens injury. The latter demands attention, adjustments, sometimes improvisation. Even small changes, resting the wrist for a few minutes, shifting stance, switching hands, can make a difference. You experiment subtly, almost subconsciously, because the cost of ignoring fatigue is high. The work continues regardless. Sparks fly, iron bends and resists, the bellows squeak. Villagers appear at the forge, adding minor interruptions. You nod politely, answer questions, and resume your labor, balancing social demands against the need to maintain rhythm. Exhaustion blurs the boundary between alertness and autopilot. You work by instinct as much as thought.
There's a quiet camaraderie in this shared struggle. Fellow smiths in nearby workshops experience similar fatigue. You nod to each other across distances, a silent acknowledgement of shared endurance. You understand that this is a common condition of the craft, passed down through apprenticeships, centuries of practice, and relentless repetition.
As the day finally winds down, your body protests more loudly. Muscles stiffen, joints ache, and minor injuries sting in ways they didn't before.
Yet the forge is not forgiving. Some tasks remain. You finish the last piece of iron, carefully checking angles, heat, and structure. Satisfaction is muted, but genuine. You've survived another day of relentless labor.
You step back, wiping sweat from your brow, flexing aching fingers and shoulders. Tomorrow promises the same, a repeating cycle of fatigue, persistence, and gradual mastery. You carry the exhaustion home, layered with minor triumphs, and brace for the repetition of the next day. Fatigue is no longer a temporary inconvenience. It is a constant, intimate companion. By now, heat has become as familiar as the rhythm of your own heartbeat. The forge doesn't just warm the iron, it warms the air, the stone floor, and eventually you. It seeps into your clothes, your skin, your very bones, a persistent companion that refuses to let you forget the intensity of the work. Sweat drips steadily down your back, pooling at the small of your spine before trickling further, cooling in fleeting bursts before it is replaced by more. You shrug it off because, frankly, it's easier to endure than to argue with physics.
Medieval blacksmiths understood the necessity of heat, but not in modern scientific terms. Mainstream historical sources confirm that controlling the forge temperature was essential. Too cool and the iron would resist your hammer. Too hot and it could become brittle or warp unpredictably. This isn't theoretical. It is something you feel in your muscles, in the way the hammer meets the iron, in the slight hesitations that signal danger. The heat is alive in a way that challenges both body and skill simultaneously.
The bellows demand attention. Pumping steadily, rhythmically, you maintain the airflow, controlling the fire without thinking about it too much. There's a tactile intimacy in this act. The leather flexes under your hand, the metal rods shift, the hinges squeak just enough to remind you they are alive. Every puff of air intensifies the heat. Every pause lets it soften. It's a negotiation that lasts hours, and the bellows never complain, never tire, unlike you.
Quirky fact incoming. Some blacksmiths reportedly added wet clay to the base of their fires to control heat and shape airflow. It's a messy, smudgy, slightly ridiculous solution, but it worked. You find yourself mimicking these old techniques, layering ash and clay here and there, as if ancient hands are guiding yours. Whether it actually improves the fire or just gives you confidence is up for debate. Historians still argue whether these adjustments were more symbolic than practical, but in practice, they feel necessary. Heat brings a peculiar clarity. You notice subtleties, the faint shift in iron color, the soft whine of cooling metal, the small tremor in your wrist after repeated strikes. Yet it also brings discomfort, and sometimes a creeping kind of delirium. Your mind drifts, imagining the iron moving itself, bending under invisible forces, or thinking the sparks form words that vanish before they can be read. This is the fringe territory of forge fatigue, whispered about in some old tales, but never formally documented. You experience it as a soft, teasing hallucination that never fully takes hold.
Joke 1 flits in gently. You realize that your day could be summarized as standing in a personal sauna, hitting glowing sticks with other glowing sticks. Joke 2 emerges as you picture medieval instruction manuals trying to explain this to an outsider. Step 1, endure relentless heat. Step 2,
The iron itself is unforgiving under this heat. Every strike of the hammer must be deliberate. Too soft, and it will bend incorrectly. Too hard, and it will split. The glowing bar seems almost alive, writhing under your hands. Its heat is radiating back at you, a warning and a reminder of your mortal limits. You wipe sweat from your eyes and adjust your stance. The floor beneath your boots, hot, uneven, and a subtle threat.
Historians still debate whether the mastery of heat was learned through formal apprenticeship or trial and error. Your experience leans heavily on the latter. The forge teaches you in real time, burning lessons into memory, into calloused hands, into sweat-stained sleeves. Every error, every near burn, Every warped piece becomes an intimate teacher. There's no substitute for direct exposure to fire, no shortcut to understanding how much heat the iron will take before it protests.
The environment itself conspires against comfort. Smoke curls in lazy, insistent spirals, clinging to your skin. The stone floor radiates warmth, holding on to the day's heat long after the fire dies down. Even shadows feel warmer here, and the air grows thick, making each breath slightly more effortful. You adapt, unconsciously controlling your inhalation, adjusting your movements to minimize discomfort while maintaining productivity. It is a subtle dance, balancing heat, fatigue, and precision. Occasionally, sparks land on clothing or skin, but these small incidents barely register anymore. A brief sting, a hiss of air, and then you are back to work. You've become part of the heat, both subject and agent, melding with the environment in a way outsiders would find unbearable. But this is survival, mastery, and the essence of the blacksmith's trade, enduring fire while shaping it into something useful. Even meals are touched by heat. A loaf of bread left nearby becomes toasted on the edges, a reminder that your forge shapes more than iron. Everything is flavored by warmth, by smoke, by the invisible persistence of fire. You pause for a sip of water, tasting iron and ash faintly on your tongue, the environment leaving a permanent, almost affectionate trace. The day winds slowly toward evening. Heat softens with time, ember coals radiating more gentle warmth. You step back from the anvil, stretching muscles long neglected in pursuit of precision. Your body is exhausted, yes, but there's a strange satisfaction in knowing you've survived another day of relentless temperature, muscle, and metal. By the time the forge cools enough for relative comfort, you feel the lingering presence of heat in your hair, on your skin, deep in your bones. It will fade eventually, but its lessons remain. You have learned to read the fire, to anticipate its moods, and to negotiate with a force far older and more demanding than you. And yet, despite the pain, sweat, and small injuries, you would return tomorrow. The heat is relentless, yes, but it is also strangely compelling. You belong here in a way you cannot explain, as if the forge itself has chosen to include you in its stubborn, glowing world. Noise is constant in your world. Not the kind of noise that distracts or startles, but the steady, insistent rhythm of metal against metal, bellows pumping, and the occasional hiss or pop of hot iron striking cooler air. It fills the forge, the village, and eventually your own head. By now, you've become attuned to it, not just hearing, but feeling it in your bones, sensing the cadence, anticipating the next strike before it happens. Hammer against anvil, clang. Bellows exhale, wheeze. Sparks scatter. Your ears ring quietly in the background, a near-constant hum that blends with your heartbeat. Mainstream historical accounts confirm that medieval blacksmiths spent long hours in environments far louder than most modern workplaces, with no ear protection to speak of. Your hearing adapts, filtering some sounds, amplifying others, but the constant presence of noise never disappears entirely. The noise serves multiple purposes. It signals progress, the rhythm of work, the alignment of effort with metal, but it also wears on you, subtly eroding patience and sharpening attention simultaneously. Each clang demands precision. Each hiss carries information about temperature, tension, and quality. Noise becomes a teacher as much as a tormentor. Quirky fact: in some regions, apprentices would learn to recognize the personality of different hammers and anvils based on the sounds they produced. A dull ring might indicate poor alignment, a bright ping, a well-tempered surface. Some smiths claimed they could tell the origin of an iron bar just by the note it emitted under a strike. Whether this is exaggeration or folklore is unclear. Historians still argue if auditory skill was consciously cultivated or a byproduct of constant exposure. You suspect a little of both. Joke 1 drifts softly.
You realize that technically you could probably play an entire symphony on your forge if someone handed you sheet music. Joke 2 follows when you consider that the villagers probably hear only chaos, while you detect subtle melodies in the rhythm of work. Joke 3 slides in as you imagine composing a lullaby entirely of sparks, clangs, and mellows, a bedtime story that would simultaneously soothe and terrify. Noise also interacts with fatigue. Your muscles are tired, your joints ache, and the ringing in your ears is louder than usual. You start to notice small hesitations, the difference between a controlled strike and one that risks misalignment. The noise, which once guided you, now tests your endurance. You push through it, because stopping isn't an option, and because each successful strike counters the invisible weight of sound.
Visitors add their own auditory layer. Farmers call greetings from the doorway. Horses shuffle impatiently. Children peek in and squeal softly, startling both horse and smith alike. Each addition requires quick recalibration. You adapt, modulating your movements, listening for warnings, responding to minor distractions without breaking rhythm. Medieval blacksmithing is a symphony of multiple performers, some unpredictable, some essential.
Historians still debate whether the physical and auditory strain contributed to earlier cognitive fatigue or simply shaped skilled adaptability. Your experience suggests the latter. Repetition, attentiveness, and noise combine to create a mental toughness that outsiders rarely understand. You are constantly aware, constantly reacting, but also internally steady. Noise becomes a backdrop to focus, a constant companion, rather than a mere nuisance. Even meals and conversation are affected. Speak too loudly, and you strain your voice. Speak too softly, and you are unheard over hammer and bellows. You learn to gauge your volume, the timbre of your voice, even your timing, based on the persistent auditory environment. Communication becomes part of the craft, inseparable from labor. The forge is not silent. Your mind has to adapt to it entirely. Nighttime does not entirely relieve you. The echoes linger in your head, subtle phantom clangs when all else is quiet. Sleep arrives slowly, punctuated by half-imagined noises from the day's labor. Sparks flash behind your eyelids, iron bends under phantom hammers, and bellows hiss softly like a ghostly companion. You sigh, roll over, and adjust to the rhythm that never quite stops. There is also a fringe idea, whispered in some guild circles, that exposure to the forge's constant noise enhanced blacksmiths' sensitivity to vibration and timing. Whether this is true or simply a convenient tale is unclear. You feel that the constant ringing has sharpened instincts. You can predict the bounce of a bar, the flex of a hammer, the exact moment an ember will flare, simply because the forge has trained your perception relentlessly. By the end of a long day, you realize noise is not just an environmental factor. It is part of your identity. You are defined by your rhythm, your tolerance, your capacity to endure and adapt. Noise shapes skill, shapes focus, shapes endurance, and sometimes even shapes character. The forge speaks to you continuously, and you speak back, not with words, but with hammer, fire, and breath. You step back, arms sore, shoulders tight, ears ringing softly, and listen to the dying fire. The day's noise fades into the softer, warmer hum of cooling iron and settling ash. You inhale deeply, tasting smoke in your mouth and fatigue in your bones. Tomorrow will bring new clanging, new rhythms, new auditory challenges. For now, the forge is quiet enough to be almost meditative. Almost. And you know deep down that the noise will return. It is not a nuisance. It is a constant reminder that you are part of something persistent, ancient, and demanding. A world that speaks loudly and requires attention. Noise is the forge, the iron, the craft, and ultimately, the life of a medieval blacksmith. Darkness comes slowly in the village. By the time the sun dips below the horizon, shadows stretch across the forge floor, mingling with lingering smoke and the faint glow of embers. You wipe sweat from your brow
and realize that the day's labor has left its imprint on your body and mind. Your muscles ache, your joints protest, and the lingering smell of smoke has seeped into your hair, clothes, and even your skin. There's no escaping it, and you wouldn't want to. It's part of the work, part of the craft, part of the identity that binds you to this place and to this life.
Evening light shifts the forge into a different rhythm. The glow of the fire is softer, the clanging of hammer and iron replaced by the occasional ping as you check, tweak, and fine-tune pieces that will be delivered tomorrow. You are meticulous, because after long hours of heat, fatigue, smoke, and noise, precision is both a relief and a necessity. Every horseshoe, every plowshare, every hinge must be right. Mistakes cannot be hidden by time or distance.
Mainstream historical accounts tell us that blacksmiths often worked from sunrise to sunset, 6 or 7 days a week. Evening was not a pause, it was a transition, a final review, a chance to ensure that the day's labor wouldn't unravel overnight. You feel the weight of this responsibility in your bones, your eyes tired but alert, scanning every surface, every curve, every joint. Evening is quiet, yes, but it is not idle. Fringe details whisper that some blacksmiths used the dimming light to practice subtle techniques, movements refined in shadow to improve precision. Historians still argue whether this was common or merely anecdotal, a romanticized vision of craft. You do it without thinking, naturally adjusting angles, noticing minor imperfections that daylight might have overlooked, finding satisfaction in tiny victories that are visible only to you and the iron.
Joke 1 drifts softly. You realize the evening is basically a slow-motion encore, a rehearsal for tomorrow's relentless symphony of hammering, heat, and bellows. Joke 2 follows when you consider that while villagers are preparing meals and lighting candles, you are still negotiating glowing metal like a medieval DJ. Joke 3 settles in quietly as you glance at your hands, imagining them as glowing manuscripts of the day's labor, each scar and blister a note in a complicated score.
Evening also brings reflection. You think about the villagers who relied on you, the horses that will need new shoes, the tools that will see fields and kitchens the next day. Dependency has been a constant companion, shaping not just your hours, but your thoughts. You wonder if they realize how much work, fatigue, and care have gone into each piece. Probably not, and that is fine. Recognition is nice, but it isn't the reason you endure this life.
Supply considerations creep back into your awareness. Charcoal stacks, iron bars, and tools must be ready for the next day. Tomorrow's work cannot be completed without preparation tonight. You check each item meticulously, moving pieces slightly, organizing for efficiency. Some bars are warped slightly, some edges need reheating. This is part of the endless loop. Prepare, forge, adjust, repeat. You accept it with a mixture of resignation and quiet pride.
Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths viewed their work as purely functional, purely artistic, or somewhere in between. You realize your answer is both. Functionality is mandatory, but there is a subtle artistry in control, rhythm, and problem solving. You shape iron not just because it must be shaped, but because doing it well satisfies something deeper, a tactile understanding of the world's physicality. Even as the forge cools, the fatigue remains. Muscles throb, shoulders complain, back aches, and hands are stiff with heat, sweat, and repeated strikes. You flex them carefully, testing mobility, checking for hidden bruises, minor injuries, or signs that overexertion has taken its toll. This is your private ritual, a conversation with your body, one that must happen to continue tomorrow and the day after.
Noise recedes, replaced by the occasional hiss of cooling metal, a quiet creak of bellows left slightly open, and the soft sigh of settling embers. The air is dense with the day's memory, smoke, heat, sweat, and metal. You breathe it in deeply, letting it saturate awareness, a final act of communion with the forge before the outside world demands attention. There is calm here, quiet, but it is a different calm than sleep. It is the calm of completion, of survival, of a day that did not break you.
Visitors no longer appear. The village has retreated into homes, hearths, and lantern light. You are alone, but not lonely. The forge feels alive, as it always does, with lingering energy, warmth, and the echo of labor. Shadows stretch across tools and workpieces, and you imagine the iron dreaming quietly in the ember glow, resting as you will soon, ready to meet your hands again tomorrow.
Evening reflection is also mental. You tally the day's achievements, repairs completed, new pieces forged, minor crises navigated without catastrophe. You note what must be improved, what supplies need attention, and what techniques might be refined. Your mind is fatigued, yes, but alert in a different way, cataloging experience, storing lessons in memory, embedding muscle memory deeper so that tomorrow is a little easier, or at least a little more efficient. By the time the last embers have cooled, you step outside into the soft night, drawing a long, deliberate breath. The village is quiet. Stars glimmer faintly above, indifferent to the forge, to your work, to your fatigue. You feel the day settle in your bones. Pain, sweat, noise, heat, smoke, and pressure. All of it condenses into a heavy but satisfying awareness. You endured, you accomplished, you survived.
And yet, despite everything, the fatigue, the smoke, the dependency, the constant labor, you know you will return. The forge is relentless, but it is also strangely magnetic, demanding, and instructive. You carry the day's experience like armor, preparing for the repetition and variation of tomorrow, understanding that mastery is incremental, endurance is survival, and the life of a medieval blacksmith is both punishing and oddly compelling. Night deepens, and with it, the forge finally quiets. The fires reduce to faint embers, glowing softly like tiny coals of memory. And you step back, letting your muscles stretch, joints creak, and mind drift. This is the part of the day where reflection and relief meet, when exhaustion transforms from a burden into a gentle, almost meditative state. Your hands still smell of iron and smoke. Your clothes cling with the residue of sweat and ash, and yet there is a subtle satisfaction in knowing the work is complete. For now.
The wind carries faint scents from the village. Baked bread, smoke from other hearths, the earthy aroma of damp soil. You breathe it in slowly, deliberately, allowing your body to register calm alongside fatigue. Even in darkness, the forge's influence lingers. Your skin is still warm, muscles humming faintly from repeated exertion. Your mind replaying the rhythms of hammer and bellows, sparks and metal. Mainstream historical accounts note that blacksmiths' bodies often carried the imprint of their labor long after the workday ended, muscles stiff, hands calloused, and endurance subtly deepened. You feel this in every movement. Quirky historical tidbits remind you that some blacksmiths slept with tools nearby in case a midnight emergency or sudden demand arose. This may have been practical, or perhaps superstition, but it paints a vivid picture. The forge never entirely left their awareness. You feel a small kinship with that thought, imagining tomorrow's work already shaping itself in your mind, tools and iron forming a prelude in memory before dawn.
Joke 1 drifts softly. You think about how romanticized blacksmithing sounds to outsiders. Glowing fire, sparks flying, heroic hammering, while your reality is repetitive strikes, aching joints, and soot in places you didn't know existed. Joke 2 arrives as you imagine explaining your day to someone who thinks forging a sword is like magic, when really it's endurance, precision, and quiet suffering.
Joke 3 settles in as you realize that every humorous thought is softened by fatigue, turning into gentle amusement rather than boisterous laughter. The wind cools the forge and your body alike. You sit or lean for a moment, allowing gravity to assist what muscles no longer do voluntarily. Fatigue is complete now, not just physical, but sensory, cognitive, emotional. You feel it everywhere, in the soles of your boots, the stiffness of your fingers, the ache in your shoulders, and in the subtle ringing of your ears. Noise, heat, smoke, dependency, supply worries, all these threads of the day weave together into a tapestry that is as exhausting as it is familiar.
Historians still argue whether medieval blacksmiths experienced higher incidences of chronic joint or respiratory problems compared to other craftsmen. From your lived perspective, there's little mystery. Your body records everything. Aching shoulders, stiff fingers, a subtle cough from the smoke. These are your reminders that the craft is unforgiving. Yet it is also grounding. Each ache is evidence of effort, skill, and endurance. You consider the village and the people who rely on your work. Tools repaired, horseshoes fitted, gates strengthened. There is no dramatic recognition, no grand applause, just quiet dependency and the subtle assurance that tomorrow will demand the same. The responsibility is heavy, yet it is part of the rhythm you have grown accustomed to. Life moves in cycles: forge, sweat, noise, dependency, fatigue, reflection, and sleep. You are part of that cycle now, its rhythm internalized, unavoidable, and strangely comforting. Even your breathing slows as you sit in the post-labor quiet. Your lungs remember smoke and heat, yet they also savor the cooler night air. Your heartbeat settles into a rhythm. Your mind begins to drift. Sleep is near, coaxed by repetition, fatigue, and the gentle hum of nighttime sounds. Wind and trees, distant animals, the subtle settling of the village. Slowly, you feel your awareness soften, the day's intensity fading into the quiet warmth of night. Your muscles relax further, stretching gently, unwinding the tension of hours spent lifting, striking, and bending. The forge is quiet now, its glow a distant memory, and you let the lingering warmth seep from your bones into the calm air around you. Breathing slows, and with each exhale, the smoke, dust, and fatigue drift further from your consciousness. You are tethered to the day, yet gently released from it, floating into the softer rhythms of night.
Imagine the iron resting, the tools still, and the bellows unpumped, all part of the world pausing with you. The village itself hums quietly beyond the forge, lights dimmed, fires contained, animals settling. Even the wind seems to slow, brushing softly against your face, carrying faint scents of wood, soil, and evening. You feel connected to all of it, yet separate, suspended in this moment between effort and rest.
Your thoughts drift lightly, untethered from the forge's demands. Tiny victories, small failures, sparks and clangs, they now float past your mind like whispers, soft and distant. You inhale deeply, tasting the night air, letting it fill your lungs with calm. There is no urgency, no expectation, only the gentle unfolding of quiet hours. Let your body sink into the softness beneath you. Let your mind release tension and embrace the stillness.
The day is behind you. Tomorrow exists, but it does not need attention yet. For now, everything slows. Your heartbeat, your thoughts, your awareness of the world. You drift comfortably into darkness. The forge, the heat, the noise, the fatigue,
all folding into the gentle, endless rhythm of rest. Sleep arrives slowly, softly, and completely. You are safe. You are still. And in this quiet moment, the world feels balanced, calm, and ready to dream. End of script. Sweet dreams.